In this video, I'm going to explain a couple of ways you can get some texture very easily with things that you can pick up at an art supply store or a place like Michael's. You can get pieces of sponge, a sea sponge. This happens to be a whole sea sponge, but you can get small pieces of these in bags, and they make great texture. So there's this sponge and then a toothbrush. Now, before we start, I want to explain what I've got here. So I've got my watercolor paper. I've sketched out a fish. This is a fish called a Sergeant Major. Lives in the Caribbean, and they're black and white with little tinges of yellow. They're really beautiful. And I've laid down a very simple wash of a sandy color for the bottom of the ocean. And when you lay down your wash, don't worry about any kind of lines from your brush or putting water drop lines in there. The more lines, actually, the better when you're doing this. It doesn't really matter. You can even go back in if you don't have enough texture. You can kind of dot some more on if you think that would help. So I'm just showing you some techniques. So I'm just taking a wide brush and dotting on just to kind of rough it up a little bit more. It's pretty much dry right now, so it can take the paint. Or say you wanted one area to be a little darker because maybe it's not as well lit. So you can kind of do that by just layering color upon color. Okay, so now we're ready to flick some paint. First, I'm going to use a toothbrush and show you how that looks. So I've got a blue here. It happens to be indigo blue. I've got and I'm putting lots of water in it. Here is a burnt sienna. And those two are probably going to be good for flicking on here. A little bit of darker color is a good thing, and then we can mix them together. So first I'm going to try the mixed together amount, and I'm just going to take my toothbrush. I'm going to just put it right into that mess of paint, and before I do this, I'm going to cover. Oh, and this right here is covered with art masking fluid. This happens to be Winsor & Newton art masking fluid. Mine's a little thick, which is why it is so thick, but I've put it over the fish where I don't want the flick of the paint to go. And then I just cut out a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be exact. It can be pretty random at this point. And then I'm going to go this way so that I don't flick underneath it so much. And I've got paper around in case it starts to flick in places I don't want it to flick. And this takes quite a bit of paint to do this. But you can see it's giving these little kind of dots of color, and it really blends together and looks very representative of sand. And you can also use the same thing for rocks. And I just flick it with my thumb. I just go like that, and it does a good job of flicking it. Now, this is still wet, so it's kind of blending together, so that's not working as well. unless you want it to be like that. Okay, so that's the toothbrush technique. And then if you want to use the sea sponge, again, you can get some paint well wet. And then find a nice edge like this. Okay, this is pretty nice right here. And I'm just going to stick that into my paint. Now it's right here on this edge. I'm going to show you on this paper first so you can see how it looks. So that's what I get from this. One thing you want to do with a sponge is go and turn it in different directions so you don't get the same texture all the time. So that's how that looks. It's not going to be really apparent on here because this is not real dry yet. But you understand the process. I'll give it a try here with some of my ochre. Let's see what we get. Actually, not bad. So, that's how you can create a sandy or a texture of rocks, is just by adding layer upon layer upon layer. And you can even, here's the blue, little bits of that. The eye kind of blends it together. So it can really, and it's lots of fun. It's a great effect.